Good afternoon. My name's Robert Coulter. I'm the General Manager for Partnerships here at the AFA, and welcome. As you may have seen, we've been bringing you a range of exciting and timely webinars over the last few months, and today's webinar is absolutely no different. In fact, it's our very first what we're calling In Practice series webinar, designed and delivered by advice professionals, so you get first-hand, immediately implementable tools and tips to grow your knowledge and your business. So in collaboration with Pulse for Paraplanners, that's our newest AFA community of practice, we're bringing you working from home effectively for paraplanners today and post COVID-19. Presenting today, we have Lia Barnard. Lia is the Pulse Queensland State Chair. Lia has worked in the financial services industry since 2010 and has worked in a broad range of roles, including paraplanning, training, ex-plan support and administration during that time. In June 2017, Lia launched Specky Paraplanners from her home office and now manages a team of remote paraplanners who provide paraplanning support to advisors right across Australia. Jade McDonald joins Lia today. Jade began her career in financial services in 2014 and has held a broad range of roles, starting entry-level administration, but working her way up to office manager, strategy support, and a paraplanner within that office. She moved into working as a remote paraplanner with Lia at Specky Paraplanners just over 2 years ago. Now, before I hand over to Lia and Jade, I'd just like to cover off some of the webinar housekeeping. So today's webinar has up to 1 CPD hour available, and what we'll do is we'll send that out to you within the next week. Lia and Jade will answer questions, however, at the end of the presentation. So please use the Zoom QA feature. You'll see that in the slide, the diagram below here, not the chat feature. So just make sure you use the Zoom Q&A feature. I'll be back towards the end of the webinar to assist with questions and answers. I'm personally really excited about today's webinar. I know you'll find some of the insights and tips extremely valuable. Lia and Jade, welcome. Thanks for putting this important information together to help our members. Over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I know it takes time out of your busy day to do that. Jade and I have been working as paraplanners together a couple of years now. We've learned a few lessons along the way, so we hope you'll find some value from today's session. Whether you've been doing this a while or you're new to working from home and you're trying to decide if this is something you want to continue with post COVID-19.
All right, the basics. So number one, working in your pajamas is not conducive to productivity. So a quick Google will show you why this isn't a new idea. So there are countless studies and observations to confirm that dressing up to work from home might seem pointless, but it's actually not. What you choose to wear and your attitude to it affects both the quality of your work and the time you spend doing it. So firstly, it can affect your self-image. When you spend every day in frumpy clothes you probably wouldn't leave the house in, you start to feel frumpy. And this can seep into your personal and your professional life. The question you need to ask yourself is, would you be ready if a client or a supervisor rang in an unscheduled video call? I'm sure we've all seen enough Zoom fails on Facebook enough to know that it's not good enough just to be presentable from the waist up anymore. Dressing up to work from home also boosts productivity. A 2012 study from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University shows that clothing can have an impact on your personal performance and that wearing certain clothing can change your underlying mindset when approaching a task. They call it enclothed cognition. We already perceive the authority, expertise, or knowledge of others by their clothing, such as police, doctors, nurses, defence forces, etc. But one step further, and actually wearing that clothing can impact your mental approach to the activity you're doing. At the end of the day, what you wear can either help or hurt your productivity. If your relaxation happy place at the end of a hard day is pajamas, you're more likely to have a relaxed perspective while wearing them. If you dress up just a little, you may feel more productive. Secondly, your normal office routine doesn't always suit working from home. So your normal office routine likely won't. Between team meetings and regular processes, your working life at home will be a little bit different. Distractions. Enemy number one when you're working from home. Having Dr. Phil analyse a guest isn't going to help you work out your cash flow deficit, and Facebook and LinkedIn aren't going to write your SOA. You don't have these things going on in an office, so best not to have them going on while you're working from home. And setting boundaries. If you can have your workspace in its own dedicated location in your house, even if it's a desk in the corner of a living room like mine is, it will help create the mental separation of this is work when you sit down in that space. Setting boundaries can be hard if your whole family is home, like mine has been for the last nearly 3 months. But when I'm at my desk, it's work time, and my teenage kids have adapted fairly well, with the exception of refereeing the odd WWE style argument. Getting the balance right. So achieving that fabled work-life balance isn't just set and forget. Instead, it's a moving target that will constantly change, and never more so than now. Working from home doesn't mean you will no longer have busy periods and quiet weeks. So this week my kids have gone back to school, and I'm in my house on my own for the first time in nearly 3 months, and it's actually quite bizarre. I'd found a new normal. Now that they're back at school, I'll adjust to our new normal, which is more like the old normal pre-COVID, but not quite, and I'll find the balance again. Slowly, as life returns to whatever normal it ends up actually being at the end of all of this, maybe sport might kick off again, and we'll have to adjust yet again. I know some have started to already, but soon others will be, that aren't usually working from home, will start going back into the office or meeting with clients again. It will shift, it will move. Being able to adapt to your circumstances will help. Just remember that, like everything else in life, change is inevitable. Early bird or night owl. So if you have the flexibility to choose your own hours, how can you use this to work more effectively? Do you need to plan around family events or commitments? We're lucky, we get to set our own hours at Specky, but we're still expected to be contactable during business hours. Personally, I like to start early. I'm often at my desk well and truly working by 6 a.m. and like to have my to-do list ticked off by 3 o'clock if possible for when the kids get home. This changes and moves around the work and family commitments and what that requires. Some days I'll start late and finish late, and I have the flexibility to be able to do a doctor's appointment or take the kids somewhere or go to a school event if I need to, without having to worry about getting my job done or having to take official time off. The most important part of this is, if you have the choice, finding when you work best. For me, a majority of the time, it's early mornings before most are even opening their eyes, and I'm up with my husband at 4 o'clock in the morning. I like the fresh, crisp mornings with a cup of coffee. If you don't have that flexibility and your workday is much the same as usual, 8 to 9 a.m. to 4 to 5 p.m., then you might benefit from our discussion a little later on how to make that the most productive time possible.
Okay, good communication. Obviously, good communication is important to be successful in any role, but it's absolutely crucial when you're working remotely. We know that on average, 93% of communication is nonverbal. So when we can't speak in person, it's important that we work hard to avoid misunderstandings and build trust with our colleagues. Internally, if you find that you're working better outside of traditional hours like Jade does, it's really handy to take advantage of your calendar. So whether you're using Outlook or Gmail, to let the rest of the team know when you're available if you are part of a team. We would suggest that emails aren't probably the best option for internal communication, as inboxes get clogged up and emails can easily be missed. Instead, you might want to consider an instant messaging system. We've got a few options on the screen there: Slack, Voxer, Zoom, Skype for Business, and Microsoft Teams is a new one that is quite popular as well. Not only are these quick and easy, but a lot of them also show availability for the team. So this is less about keeping track of people and more about respecting people's time out when they take it. So just seeing who's available and not calling them when they are choosing to have some time away from their desk. Within our business, we use Zoom for a combination of video calls and instant messaging. The chat function on Zoom allows for one-to-one chats, but also has group channels, which are really handy for us with shared software logins or getting a quick answer to a purely technical question, because you can just fire it off to the whole team and whoever's available will answer it for you. Externally, emails are still a really valid way to be communicating with your advisors or with clients if you're in a client-facing role. It's familiar, it's convenient for many, and a lot of people get their emails to their phones, so it's quick and easy. But there are other methods that you can be considering as well. It's a brave new world. My 87-year-old grandfather jumps onto Zoom every Sunday with the family, even though he still won't use an ATM. So don't be afraid to try new things within the business. Video is a great way to communicate complex ideas, whether it's live or recorded. There's lots of recording options as well, like Loom. Excuse me. Although we make our living as paraplanners conveying complex ideas in a simple and easy to read format, or we try to, sometimes it is easier to talk through something to get the best result. We find it's really handy to have video and screen sharing when things like you're working through some complex modelling and you need to discuss it with the advisor. A 10-minute chat on Zoom can save 6 or 7 emails back and forth while you try and work out what the other person wants. Lastly, the humble telephone call is obviously still a great way to touch base with your colleagues or your advisors. And when setting up your home office, it's worthwhile thinking about what sort of phone do you actually need? Do you want a desk phone? Will you just use your mobile, or will you set up some sort of VoIP internet system? Okay, taking regular breaks. Now, this is one that a lot of people seem to struggle with, and I don't know why, but paraplanners in particular seem to want to learn this one the hard way. If you're looking at this slide and you're thinking, this doesn't apply to me, I can concentrate for long periods of time, don't need to worry about it. I would ask you to think about, after you've been at the desk for a long day, do you ever feel frazzled or brain fried? It's probably because you're not taking enough breaks. We all know that overworking and not looking after yourself will inevitably lead to burnout. It's essential to de-stress and recharge the mind and body. There's lots of surveys and scientific studies you can look at that show that regular breaks improve job satisfaction, productivity, mental well-being, and creativity. So I would encourage you to try it out for a week. Set a timer on your phone if you need to. Aim for 60 to 90-minute blocks. Start with 90 and work it back if you're not convinced. And when the timer goes off, you don't need to jump up immediately. Finish your train of thought, finish what you're doing, and then jump up and take a short break. It doesn't have to be long. It can be as short as standing up, doing some stretches, or going outside if you can and throw the ball for the dog. Even just doing a lap of the lounge room via the fridge. I know lots of people doing that at the moment. The other options are pulling up a quick 5-minute yoga video, or even if you want to, spending 10 minutes going through Facebook. I would suggest trying to avoid screens, but if that's something that relaxes you and it helps you to switch off, it's an option. Okay, next up, turning notifications. So on average, we spend 3 hours and 15 minutes on our smartphones each day. And throughout the day, we pick up our phones an average of 58 times per day. About 30 of those are usually work day. So that's massive. If you're not convinced about those stats, you can actually check your stats on your smartphone. So head into your settings, it's usually battery or digital well-being, something like that, depending on if you're on an iPhone or an Android. I looked at my stats before or while we were prepping up this presentation. I'm a little bit below average, but still staggeringly high. So when you consider all of those interruptions, and we found that unrelated interruptions to your work can actually take 25 minutes to recover from. So that's a huge amount of time being wasted time using buzzers. Add that to all the time we spend looking at our computers. It's a lot of screen time. Multitasking is inefficient, and as paraplanners, it can lead to mistakes. So I would suggest you consider turning notifications on both and your phone just to avoid temptation to multitask. When you're looking at notifications, consider which ones you actually need. So for me, I still get my calendar reminders so that I don't miss meetings, and I get the Zoom notifications for our chat so that I'm accessible for the team when they need me. That way, with the emails, I don't get them popping up and I can check them on my terms. I aim to check my emails 2 to 3 times a day. Sometimes it's a little bit more often because I do get a fair volume of emails.
Your workspace. So I'm a little bit of a nerd as far as stationery and desk setup. Establishing your happy little corner where you spend most of your day is fairly important. This is more important than you actually realize. Just like getting out of your PJs can help how you feel, having a dedicated workspace is the same. Sitting in bed or on the couch is not a conducive environment for work. It's where you relax. If possible, having that dedicated space with a desk that your work life is contained in will help with the mental preparation and separation of work and home. Keeping your space tidy and clutter-free with file storage if required, also important points. It doesn't have to be boring or clinical. Make it your own space. You are at home after all. I've got a bunch of flowers sitting next to me on the right, and I've got some of my kids' artwork sitting at the base of my screens. Tools of the trade. When I actually started working from home, I jumped straight in with a desktop PC and 2 screens and graduated to 3 screens about 6 months ago. This is also a big ball of personal preference. I have 3 22-inch screens, and another member of our team at Specky has 2 much larger screens. You could also run a laptop with a screen attached to extend your display. Whatever preference you have, you need to find what works for you. There are studies that actually support the use of multiple screens, and that productivity can increase by 20 to 30% and up to 20% reduction in errors, therefore less stress, when using multiple displays. If you can, it's great. Apart from my triple screen setup, my chair is my next favourite thing of my desk, and it's boring, I know. Everyone knows sitting in one place all day does no favours for the neck and back, hence why taking those regular breaks are important. Stand up, move around. I remember when I started working from home, Lia would always encourage me to get a good chair because mine was atrocious. And let's be honest, a good chair is an investment. But wow, did it change my life when I got one. A good quality ergonomic chair with the adjustable seat tilt, a backrest adjustment, and good lumbar support cannot be understated. You'll definitely appreciate not being sore and achy after sitting in a good chair. Your back will thank you later. I also absolutely love my wrist rests, both the long one that I have in front of my keyboard and the one that's attached to my mouse pad. They're simple ones from Officeworks, but they definitely do their job. I recently had to work for a few days from beside a hospital bed on a laptop without my 3 screens and my chair and my wrist rests. And let me tell you, by day 2, my keyboard, mouse and rests came with me.
Just got to interrupt here a second, just so everybody knows she didn't have to work. She was choosing to work beside the hospital bed. She had some downtime, so I'm not forcing people to work from their deathbeds, just to be clear.
Not at all. So after all of that, you can have these things, but setting them up correctly is just as important. And I'm sure we all know the best way to maintain good posture is to have feet flat on the floor or on a footrest if your feet don't reach the floor, and eyes level with the top of our screens to avoid neck strain. Now, it's all well and good to have 3 screens and a banging chair, but if your legs are hanging and you're looking down at your screens, you'll end up with back strain, dead legs and a bung neck. Do it right. It might feel weird to begin with, but it's worth it. A few other little things that might be interesting for you to look into would be a quiet keyboard. I know my husband was injured for 3 months last year and was home with me, and by the end of the second day, he marched me off to Officeworks to buy something quieter because it was doing his head in. The other thing that I love is a programmable mouse, ergonomic of course, and all these things are personal preference for you to consider. Now, doing an occupational health and safety check involves checking the height and distance of your monitors, your chair, your keyboard. Simple things like cords or lighting can also impact your workspace as well. Each state should have a reference document for compliant desk setup, and I know Queensland does, but if you're after more info, let us know.
Okay, your IT setup. So obviously the COVID restrictions came in pretty quickly, and many of you are probably working with a limited setup at the moment. But if this is something that you're considering doing long term, the right setup is really important. If you're taking advantage of being on a laptop at the moment and can't wait for the cafes to open so that you can head out and sip your latte while you're working, having an antivirus and VPN sorted should be a top priority. Some of you may also be finding that not having a physical in-tray is causing problems. So it may be time to look at how your financial planning software can help better with workflow management, or even getting a separate task management software, which we'll touch on. Data storage is another one that we take for granted at times, now that most of us are using cloud storage, I think. But just having a look at your settings is also really important. Can you implement 2-factor authentication for some additional security? And can you make sure that your data is only stored in Australia, as a lot of licensees require that as well. If you're in it for the long haul, reviewing your internet plan is also worthwhile. For good audio and video quality during conferencing like this, or just the normal Zoom chats, a minimum speed of 50 megabits per second is recommended, which means you may need to add a speed pack to your internet plan. For employers, you obviously need to look at what you need to provide your employees to work efficiently long term. For employees, keep a record of any out-of-pocket expenses. For anyone in compliance watching along today, this is obviously the part where we add a disclaimer and recommend you seek tax advice about that, because we are not tax professionals. Contractors, confirm your obligations to the licensees you work with regarding data and security, because they do vary fairly significantly. And lastly, the backup plan. So everyone should know what happens if shit happens. So you come into the office one day, you turn on the computer, smoke starts coming out, there's flames, it's cactus. Do you have a backup plan? So do you have another laptop you can be working on? Is it just as simple as walking into Officeworks and getting something new, or will it take time? For me, I'm in North Queensland, so a bit of a cyclone plan up here. We have a generator, but my team knows that if there's a cyclone, I'll be working at a reduced capacity. For my partner, the beer fridge takes priority over my laptop as often as not. Okay, the 3 Ps. So this is obviously not the most glamorous tip, but it is important, and I would really encourage you to think about them now that you're working from home. It doesn't mean you spend the next week writing out a massive procedures manual that you never look at again. Instead, it's more about getting out the information that's in your head onto paper so that you don't have to rely on your memory for those repetitive tasks. I'm a huge fan of checklists for this purpose. We use them a lot in our business and even for me personally. As you're working away instinctively, you often, as paraplanners, you know that certain advisors like things worded this way. For this office, we might upload the SOAs to a note. For others, it might be a task. And there's different little things that you just know when you're doing it every day. But if you didn't touch those files for a few months, would you still remember those finer details? From experience, I can say that it's unlikely. So to start simple, I would suggest getting some checklists just for those little things that you know add up to a great SOA. So all those little bits and pieces that you do, but would be hard to explain to someone else. From there, you can progress to automating some of those repetitive things, and it improves your efficiency over time. I would really highly recommend just getting some of it out of your head and onto paper. Next up is workflow management. Obviously, a logical step from procedures is how you're tracking your work. So how are you currently doing that? Do you have some sort of system in place, or is it just memory and you've got a bunch of old emails sitting in your inbox and that's how you track it? I would really encourage you, whether you're employee or you're a sole trader, whatever you might be doing, to find a way to keep a record of the work you've completed and what you're currently completing. It'll save you oodles of time in the long run, and it's a really great way to reduce your stress. It's just another thing that's out of your mind, and you know, you're letting the spreadsheet look after it for you, especially in busy periods. So you can look at a few options. Can your financial planning software do that? Or do you have a CRM, or do you need something separate to manage it? It could be as simple as using the to-do lists in Outlook, or something comprehensive like Salesforce or Trello. If you are looking for something more comprehensive, I would really encourage you to decide what you want the workflow management system to do for you first. So we've got some options on the screen there. Do you need threads? Do you want time tracking? Do you need to have multiple people involved? Do you want email notifications? And obviously, importantly, are you willing to pay for that?
Detailed notes. So obviously the advisor perspective and the compliance perspective is you can never have enough notes. Lucky for us, it doesn't stop with paraplanning. So the good old term of the paper trail is still relevant today, just taken on a different meaning with more of an electronic trail, but no less important. One of the things we rely on heavily in our business is detailed notes. One of the systems we use for our task tracking enables us to have a separate task for each document we're working on with comment threading ability. This for us is the holy grail. Do you need more information from an advisor, or need to clarify something and send an email? Flick off that email, make a note that you did it and why. I can barely remember what happened yesterday, let alone last week or last month. So keeping a note of those when you might not touch that file again for another day or two is really important. Phone conversations as well. If you have a chat with an advisor or a provider about something related to the plan, make a detailed note. Keeping each file's notes separate is also good, so you can find everything easily. I know in compliance it's all about file notes, and it's definitely the same for us. As an outsourced paraplanner especially, keeping detailed file notes as such can be a lifesaver to not only helping you remember where a particular request is up to, but it can also help in future with queries long after a document has been completed and sent. We also save those email paper trails. It will cover your butt one day. You might get a query a week, 2, sometimes months later around audits, asking for further clarification of why something was done a certain way, especially if the strategy or products changed from the original request, which we all know happens. If you've got your own file notes and copies of email discussion that was made, you will never have to worry about it.
Okay, keeping up to date. There are so many resources available to us as paraplanners, but sometimes it's a little bit hard to get access to them. So if you work in an office, your first point of call should be your advisors and the ARs in your office. Ask them to get you on all of the mailing lists that they also get from the licensee and the different product providers that they're in contact with regularly, so that you don't have to rely on them being on forwarded to you, because sometimes they slip through the cracks, and it's just a lot easier if everyone in the office knows that everyone's getting the relevant emails. If you're an outsourcer, obviously you don't always have that option, but you can still access those emails. Try contacting your BDMs or the PDMs or the RMs, all of those. Getting in on licensee updates is an absolute game changer. We all know the strategies technically, but different licensees have different requirements about how we present those. So keeping across them is a lot easier if you've got the information coming to your inbox rather than you chasing it down when it happens sort of after the fact with an SOA. For technical resources, there's a lot of other great options as well. Macquarie has the Big Black Book and the Little Black Book. CFS has the First Tech Guides. Both are great when you're needing to brush up on a particular strategy or look at those detailed numbers. If you need to complete CPD points, obviously the AFA is running these lovely webinars. There's a bunch of other providers also running some really great content that are offering CPD. You've also got your paid options like Kaplan or Caddy, which is fairly new on the market, and I've heard some really positive feedback about that one as well. If you're looking for paraplanner specific education, I'd encourage you to reach out to Kate Fellows at the Professional Paraplanner. She's got some great courses for new paraplanners, and she's also rolling out some specialist content for those of you looking to upskill. Kate is part of the AFA Pulse committee, so you can grab her on the Facebook page or on LinkedIn as well. She's on there. Lastly, if you're into podcasts, there are a whole bunch of great options out there for paraplanners and for financial planning broadly. Some of them are also CPD accredited. The one from the Professional Planner is one that's popular in our office.
All right, so now more than ever, avoiding loneliness with being stuck at home is fairly important. Like networking in the real world, making and maintaining meaningful connections takes work. And the advantage of doing this in the online world is you aren't limited to geography. So this one can actually be tough for those of us who tend not to like putting ourselves out there. We're all stuck in much the same predicament at the moment, where we're all in this isolation thing together, but still very much apart. But just because we have to keep 1.5 meters between us and the person standing in front of us in line at Kmart doesn't mean we can't stay connected. So there's a lot of ways that don't take too much effort, but do require being a little more proactive than we may have been previously. It's not as simple as having a chat with your co-worker next to you anymore. We're communicating online, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, or just within your team through one of the instant messaging services we mentioned earlier, but it does take a little bit of thought. Now, LinkedIn is not only a useful resource for networking in a business sense, but it can help you to get out of your little bubble. It doesn't all have to be related to the financial services sector either. I follow people on LinkedIn like Mark Boris and Gary Vee, and their small snippets of info that is not related to the financial services industry can actually really add value, both personally and professionally, as well as being able to interact and chat with other people. Facebook groups and group chats are great as well. Joining Facebook groups you're interested in, and that again doesn't have to be limited to the financial services industry. If it is, we've obviously got the AFA Pulse group, the Paraplanner Hub for paraplanners is another great resource that we have available to us for industry-based chat, and you will get some great value out of those. You've got the AFA Inspire and GenX are also good networking groups to connect with. There's also the Advice Movement, XY Advisor, My Risk Advisor. So there's actually a lot out there. You just need to look. Getting started though can be the hardest part. Start with engaging with posts and comments instead of just lurking. Liking a post or even a simple comment that what someone said added value to you or that you learned something is an easy way to start engaging. When you're comfortable, share your own value as well. You'll be amazed at how much easier it is once you start. Now, my favourite way to connect at the moment is actually within our team, within our Zoom channels. We have a lot of fun, possibly too much within our team, and I know the girls are watching and they're probably giggling right now. We communicate via Zoom with the instant messaging feature, both individually and through our group channels. Some cool office ideas to maintain connection are Zoom parties and knock-off drinks. We also have within our team a running themed gift competition that I am not winning, but you could do memes as well as gifts. Zoomercise is another option. Our family actually gets together most Saturdays and does a high impact training session together with my brothers and sisters-in-law and all our kids. It's great fun for those who like to exercise and just to keep connected. Looking ahead, there are also apps to help with things like Secret Santa as well. I know it can sometimes feel daunting putting yourself out there and being proactive about engaging with others, but it definitely helps. Now, I'm going to be a little bit nerdy and talk about my favourite top hacks with some of the work that we do. So, repeating header rows in Microsoft Word. Have you ever had a table that breaks over 2 pages because it's too long, or one page that your pagination means it has to break over 2 pages, and then you have rows on the next page and have no context because there's no headings? Worry no more. If you highlight the rows you want to repeat on the next page, click the Layout tab in the ribbon, you will find a button called Repeat Header Rows right towards the right-hand side. Click it and watch the magic happen. That leads me to my next hack, the Quick Access toolbar. There are a few features in Word that I use more than others when editing an SOA, and sometimes it's annoying having to click through the ribbon to find them. So if you click on almost any function in the ribbon, right-click, there is an option to Add to Quick Access toolbar. No more clicking through the ribbon. They will sit at the top of your Microsoft Word document, no matter what your ribbon is doing for you to use. Some of my favorites that I use all the time: text color, changing text size up or down by 1 size, Lia's calculate button, which you will find out in a second, and it will blow your mind if you didn't already know. Fit to window and distribute columns evenly for tables, table margins, when you've got that really annoying modeling table that just does not fit on a page nicely, and you can shrink the margins either side to make it fit. Repeating header rows, obviously, and the insert comment button. Whatever you use, you can add it to the toolbar. And lastly, especially for those of us that don't work regular hours like myself, delaying or scheduling emails. As I'm often up and working before and sometimes after acceptable normal people contact hours, Outlook has a feature that allows you to delay or schedule the sending of your email. Up at 4 a.m. and don't want to panic an advisor by sending an email? Delay it. Set it to fire off at a more acceptable 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and you're gold. But it also helps set boundaries around your availability. A lot of the time people think, oh, you work from home, you're available 24/7. But I don't want to be available to everybody 24/7. Being up late or working late is your choice, and you don't necessarily want to set the precedent of being contactable every hour of every day. Sometimes a girl likes to sleep in. I also don't want to be bothered by emails and phone calls if I'm with my family at night. Delaying those emails and scheduling them to send at an acceptable hour can help with that.
Okay, my turn. Just before I jump into my hacks, I just wanted to remind everyone we're going to send out a little cheat sheet. So all those exciting Word things that Jade mentioned, we'll send you an explanation on how to get those up. I know you all just can't wait to do it. So the calculate button that Jade mentioned, I think this is absolutely the best thing since sliced bread. When you're in a Word document and you've got tables with numbers, you've obviously got a few options as far as adding them up. You can use a calculator, drop it into Excel, but there's also a very cool function, which is the calculate button. So I've got some tables here, which you guys should be able to see, and you can select it. And when you've got the button, it's just up the top there. You click it, gives me my total down the bottom left there, but it also places it on the clipboard so I can paste it straight into my table. For me, this is an absolute game changer, especially if you're working on any sort of manual templates and you find you're adding up a lot of things. It saves so much time, and it also minimizes the chances of human error, which I am all for. So that is my number one hack. We're going to send out a video with a cheat sheet on how to get that button up into your quick access toolbar. That's what it's called up the top left there. So you guys can all implement that after the webinar. My second hack is not a tech one, it's more of a time management one, and it's the 4Ds. So this is how I manage my emails. I mentioned earlier I don't get email notifications because otherwise I just don't get anything done. I spend all day answering emails. So when I do go in to answer my emails, I apply the 4Ds. The first D is delete. It's okay to delete emails if you don't need them, any sort of newsletter type ones that aren't relevant to you that particular time, go ahead and delete them. The second one is delegate, which is my favorite some days when I get to flick them off to Jade to handle. It's fantastic. Obviously, if you're flying solo, this one won't apply to you, sorry guys. The third one is defer. So if there's preparation needed for an email or a bit of time involved to respond to it, defer it till later. And the last one is do. Those quick and easy emails, reply to them straight away, get them out of your inbox, and then move on to the ones that you've deferred, or if you're coming back to them later. My third hack is the navigation pane. So you can see it on the screen, the far left side there has the navigation panel. There's no headings in that particular document, but a lot of SOAs have headings set up. And that means that you can click through them. So if you want to go to the fees section of an SOA, for example, you can scroll down your nav pane and click fees. It saves you getting RSI on your wrist from constantly scrolling through an 80-page document. Saves your eyes. I get dizzy watching people scroll. It's so handy. And once you get used to using it, it's a real time saver and just another little efficiency. And when you add them all up, you become a lot more efficient at the editing, which is often, I think, for paraplanners, probably the less interesting part of our job. So all of those little efficiencies, the things Jade mentioned, these little ones, there's so many available. It just makes all the difference. And I think with Word too, you don't know what you don't know. So I would encourage you to just ask around. If you see someone do something in a video, ask what they did, because I learn all the time still from our team, just different things in Excel and Word, and it just makes the world of difference long term. So that is it for today. That's it from us. We've got some time for questions and answers. We have flown through our presentation, probably because we're a little bit nervous. Rob will jump in now and fire some questions off at us, hopefully.
Well, firstly, congratulations, Jade and Lia. That was just fabulous. I think, frankly, they're not only great practical tips for paraplanners, but actually for all financial services professionals. So they make a huge amount of sense. Firstly, just Lia, quickly, did you, we've got a question from Donna Timms who said, did you mention it was Kate Sparrow?
Yeah, sorry, Kate Fellows. We'll drop her name in the cheat sheet as well.
Yeah.
Just to make sure everyone's got that.
Because Kate is, we actually have Kate coming on for an upcoming webinar for folks that are out there around professional development for paraplanners. So just for the folks out there. We've got another question in from Dylan Smith. I think it's an excellent question. Thank you, Dylan, which is, I think lots of people resonate with this, is so how do you find fitting in possibly lots of different 15 to 30 minute meetings throughout the day with a competing workload? So how do you, how do you strike a balance there?
I guess, so for me, I find I have a lot of meetings and a lot of calls. I try and, if you can, schedule them in lumps. So I try and have all of those sort of meetings in the morning with all of the team, and then I can work quietly in the afternoon. Also for me, I do a little bit out of office hours. So I do my concentrating work early in the morning like Jade does. And then during office hours, I keep myself available for those sort of conversations. If you're willing to do that, I still only work a normal 7-hour day, but I split it up a little bit differently. That's one way to manage it. Jade, do you have any suggestions?
Other than scheduling things in your diary, so if you know that you're going to have a lot of meetings here and there, figure out the best time that you work doing it. It's the same as when you would normally do normal work. Figure out when you are most able to answer that question for that person. I don't like having meetings with, or feedback meetings with advisors first thing in the morning, because I like to review what I've done to actually be able to answer their question effectively. And then just the same as Lia, do it in chunks a lot of the time with a bit of a gap in between so that you know what's going on for the next discussion.
Right, thank you. It's almost, is it, could I paraphrase by saying, is that just having the discipline to have the conversations when you need to have them, and creating the right space.
Yep.
Even doing the opposite and blocking out periods where you can't have meetings is another option. If you can't always control them, but just say, every afternoon between, 1 and 3, that's my couple of hours of power, and that's when I do all my thinky work. So things like that.
And not feeling pressured either to have that conversation. Like I know, and it goes back a little bit to the conversation of, oh, well, you work from home, you're always available. If you don't want to be available, that's okay. Make the time to have the important conversation, but when it suits you, don't feel pressured to have it yesterday, like immediately.
Great, Jade. Another question through, which is from Lara, which is, how do you cope if you get stuck on a problem? So you're stuck on a particular problem and you can't work it out when you're isolated working from home. So I think the questions are orientated around, connection or connectivity with people.
Yeah, I think that first of all, I'm a big fan of take a break, walk away, fresh eyes will help. And secondly, rely on those resources. So we talked about the Pulse community on Facebook, and you've got the Paraplan Hub. There is just a bunch of legends in those groups, and they're really willing to help. So you can get in there and ask a question and people will come to your aid. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to call. You've got licensee resources, and even if it's Xplan or AdviceOS, whatever you're using, their software support is another avenue as well. They all have phone support, or most of them do, so that's another option. Don't feel like you can't call because you're an outsourcer.
Right. I think you're getting a lot of people resonate with, we just got something through, someone saying getting up at stupid o'clock. I don't know if it's stupid o'clock. I think it's the o'clock, according to you, Jade, that works for you. I don't know about getting up at 4:30 in the morning, by the way. But it sounds like you're getting a lot of resonance in the community. There was also a question around, can you register for the Cape Fellows webinar? That's not on yet, but it is coming. I might ask another question. From Renee, what's your favourite part of working from home?
Jade, you can go first.
Oh, see, for me, there are so many. The biggest benefit for me was my family, my husband, kids, some in primary school, some in high school. For me, the flexibility to be able to work when I want, how I want, it is just second to none. I would really, really struggle going back to in inverted commas, normal office job now with the flexibility that I have.
Yeah, similar for me. I think obviously our family situations are a little bit different. I only have children. I like being at home with them, but also I think for me the appeal of going out on my own was being in control of my own destiny. So I can work when I want to be working within reason, obviously. With paraplanners, you often end up being the meat in the sandwich sometimes between admin and advisors and everyone's time frames. And just being able to control that a little bit more and give myself the room to do my best work was really important to me. I hate feeling rushed with things. So that was one that got me, other than obviously the family benefits and the lifestyle choice that we made as a family.
Great. Just had a question through about people asking about how do you get a recording of this particular webinar. So for the folks out there, this will be up on the AFA website. There you go, there's access to it shortly. Got a question through from Claire here. How do you cope with the 3 p.m. fuzzies? So when you start to lose the plot, as Claire, not suggesting that either of you would lose the plot. Claire's not suggesting that at all. She's certainly not saying that. But how do you cope with that, Lia?
So look, for me, I think we may have mentioned, I'm a big fan of a nap. And look, I know some people think this is a bit of a crazy idea, but the Spanish siesta is a great idea, and not a long nap, 15 minutes. But those regular breaks will help with that. Make sure you're eating, looking after yourself. Obviously, if you're healthy and happy as a person, work follows that as well. That would be my main tip. But the other thing is, if you're working from home, you've got flexibility. If you don't feel like working and you don't have a deadline that day, take off for a couple of hours, do something else, try again later, or get up a bit earlier the next morning and have a crack at it then.
Jade, for you?
Yeah, Leah and I very much differ on this. She's the serial afternoon napper, and I just can't do it. I don't function after a nap. If I nap, that's me for the day. So I won't actually go for a sleep because I know I won't be able to function afterwards. I end up with a headache. I feel groggy. It's just not enough for me. I am a fan of the coffee and going for a walk. So I will grab a coffee, have a break, very much having the break, and even doing something slightly different, and then going back to what it was you were doing, having that break, just the brain break to get fresh eyes of what you were actually looking at before then. Have a snack, have an apple, something healthy. Don't go for the sugar route because you'll have a high and then crash really fast. A coffee and an apple gives you a bit of a rush and a little bit of sustenance for a little bit longer. And yeah, I'll take the dog for a walk. I'll hang out with the kids for a little bit. I'll just do something different, and then I'll come back, and generally I'm okay.
Fabulous. Do you question to both of you, but do you find you're doing an 8-hour day? Is your day an 8-hour day, or the question is, are you doing more than that or overtime? So I think it's sort of about almost a piece around balance, but
Yeah, so for me, part of the reason I decided to go out on my own and work from home was because of my partner's working situation. So he works away, so he's here for a week and then he's gone for a week. So the week that he's away, I'll do longer hours. I might do a 10-hour day, a few days in a row, but I generally jam in a bit more to my days because he's not here. And that means that I can free up some more time when he's not here, and I might do 5-hour days the following week. Obviously, assuming workload allows, but generally I average a normal 40-hour week if you look at sort of the long-term stats. Love the numbers, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm much similar, I guess. For us, I'm casual with what I do. So if the work is there, I'll do it. My general workload is around the 30 to 40 hours a week. And some days that will be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, nothing Thursday, Friday, and I might work Saturday, Sunday. It just depends on what we're doing at the time. But again, that's my choice to do that. I'm one of the only ones, apart from Leah in our team, that will actually do work on the weekends. The others don't like to, and that's their personal choice, but we have the flexibility to do that. So generally it will be around those, kind of 7 to 8 hours a day, depending on the workflow at the time.
Perfect. So I've got a great question here about what's the best way to get started as a contract paraplanner if you're currently a full-time employee? It's a fabulous question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think generally, obviously, you've got to keep an eye on the job market. So as the opportunities come, make sure your resume is up to date so you can apply quickly. We do, so for Specky, we do get a lot of applications whenever we put out a job, and it'll be the same for the other contracting businesses.
Yeah.
So really brushing up on your skills, making sure that you've got those different areas. It helps if you can work across a range of strategies. So if you're in an office at the moment where you do, super rollover and insurance, and that's pretty much all you do, doing some upskilling would be really advantageous. Even some other software training if you can access it, just so you've got more options. So when you do go out contracting, the work will start slowly. You're not going to walk straight into full-time hours. So you need to be prepared for that as well. Obviously have a bit of a cash reserve if you're going to resign full-time, or if you're going to try and manage that with your full-time job as well. You need to realize that you're going to have to say no to some social things and that sort of thing. But yeah, obviously the education is a big piece. Keep across the market and just reach out. Networking is really important. So connect with Jade and I on LinkedIn, jump in those groups. There's jobs going all the time in there. And when you find, if you're involved in the industry, you'll hear about those jobs, because very often the roles are filled without formal applications going out. So if you're in the know, you'll pick up those a little bit faster, I would think.
Right. Thanks, Jade. Another question that's come through is, how do you deal with the repetitiveness? So the question is, the questioner asked, they tend to fade sort of later in the week if they have similar documents, but Monday and Tuesday they're fabulous. So how do you deal with the fatigue of that?
I think it is hard at the moment, because even for us, we've been working from home for a while, but we are feeling the sameness of not being out and about because of the restrictions at the moment. Obviously, with the work itself, it is really hard to stay motivated, but I would encourage you to think about why you're doing this job. So we are actually in an industry that changes people's lives. Like, you can't forget that. What we do is important. The advice we give means that, grandma down the street, if she gets the age pension, means she can take her grandkids out once a fortnight for donuts, so donut king, whatever it might be. It can be easy to, because we're removed from it, especially as contractors, you don't know the people, the numbers rather than faces. But what you're doing is important, and it does help me, particularly when I'm a little bit frustrated with work, to know that our best work is important, and getting that done to the best of your ability and the highest quality will make an impact to someone. There's a person at the end of the line. So that would be the first thing. And it really, I know we've said it and said it and said it, but the regular break. So if you need to take a break, take it. So if you want to take Wednesdays off, take Wednesdays off and come back, start fresh on Thursday and get into those same plans again. It does happen that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. You're not going to keep getting the same work, but I get it. But it's it comes down to a little bit of, I guess, self-motivation in the end. It's a practiced thing. Jade, do you have anything to add there?
No, not really. It just the taking the regular breaks, reiterating it. We seem to be quite stubborn as paraplanners. We don't tend to listen. It's fine. I sit at a desk all day in my office job, and I can do it. But what you don't realise is that even sitting at a desk in an office, you're not going to be working straight from 9 o'clock till 12 and not have a conversation with anybody, or not get up and make a cup of tea, or whatever the case may be. So still taking those regular breaks at home. I get the monotony sometimes of maybe doing the same types of strategies very similarly. Finding something that keeps you motivated and keeps you interested. So if that means taking a break in the middle and going and binge watching something, an episode of your favorite Keeping Up with Kardashians, or whatever the case it may be, or maths, or whatever interests you, if you go and do that for a bit and come back, it's always that refreshing and trying to keep your own motivation up, knowing that there is that light at the end of the tunnel. It won't always be the same. Your day will finish, but looking at why you wanted to do it in the first place. If you don't like being a paraplanner and you don't like what you're doing, then maybe have another think.
Thanks, Jade. This question may have been answered, but I think it's worthwhile sort of repeating. So do you keep track of your time, and do you sort of treat yourselves as employees? So how do you avoid the trap of feeling like you're always working due to sort of flexible work hours? I feel you may have answered it, but I thought it might be worth reiterating.
Yeah, so for our business, we are actually employees, so that does make it easier. We do track our hours. That's how we manage things. So rather than a flat rate, the team all work, they're casually employed, so they work, the number of hours they work is what they're paid for. But setting the boundaries is really, really important. So that comes down to some of the things we talked about as far as scheduling your emails, scheduling your appointments, and setting your hours. And it doesn't mean you have to be working 9 to 5 every day. But if you get up in the morning and you say, okay, I'm going to do 2 hours this morning, I'm going to have a bit of a break, and then I'm going to finish that other SOA this afternoon, and it might take me 3 or 4 hours. That's when you stop. You've done what you needed to do for the day. Check your emails, do what you've got to do, and then turn off the computer so you don't even have the choice to go back and just answer one more email or just do one more little thing. If you know your workload and you know what you have to get done that day, get it done, turn it off, switch the phone off if you've got a work phone, and then you're done. Just like when you leave the office, you leave everything at the desk. Don't bring things with you. Don't be reading fact finds over dinner or whatever you might be doing for fun. Just, you need to really be work on that separation. And for me, the physical act of closing my office door when I'm finished for the day, because generally our house stays pretty open, that means I'm done. So find a way to manage that. Turning off the computer, turning off your phone notifications, whatever it might be. Decide on an end point and stick to it.
Oh, we might have lost Rob.
I think we might have.
Following on for that, mine would probably be very similar. I'm not lucky enough to have my own room for my office. So my desk is in the middle of my living room, in a corner of my living room. So this screen behind me, I actually have, that's our bedrooms. This way is our living room, dining room, kitchen. And in that, I have this screen up sometimes when I'm working, communicating with people. Other than that, I will find that I actually have to physically log off and shut down my computer to make sure I'm not still hanging on to any work that might be hanging around. I am switching off and not being available. The other thing I find too is that in busy periods, it does sometimes feel like you're just constantly working. And I know my husband and I can sometimes be, but I want you to spend time with me. Feel like you're always working. And that's when I've really got to make the conscious effort to stop.
No worries, I'll jump in. Okay, no problem.
Stop and just disconnect and go, okay, no, enough work for today. And then I'll just spend some quality time at home. So I am physically disconnected, even though my workspace is in my house.
G'day, Nat.
Thank you, Jade. We've just got a slight technical issue there. I'm jumping in on behalf of Rob. I'm Nat Klebert, the GM for marketing. So I'll continue on with some of the questions that we've got. One question here. Hi guys, do you think paraplanning is a viable long-term career due to the current economic situation, or potentially due to automation from a career planning perspective?
Oh, I love this question. I do get it occasionally. So look, technology is fantastic and it is making our job easier in many ways, but I don't think it replaces the role of the paraplanner. Obviously, the financial planning industry is changing significantly and it's changing quite quickly, and that means paraplanners the role is changing as well. So in the past, when paraplanning first started, it was very much an admin role. When you were filling out the old client advice file notes, there wasn't a lot going into those. That has changed, but I think technology means that we get to do more of the technical stuff, more of the strategy development, and less of the document editing. So the technology is actually helping us get more into the niche where we're actually interested. I think most paraplanners, that's why they're in the job. They like that side of it more than editing a Word document, as much as we get excited about the tools that we find in there. As far as because of COVID-19, I think it's advice is as important as ever, if not more important, particularly for people in different life stages. You look at people that are drawing down on their funds in pension phase now. The market volatility means they need someone to help them with that. They need the reassurance, and advice flows on for that, and that's for us as paraplanners. So I'm not concerned about my job at this stage.
Thank you. My internet just threw me out, but thank you to Nat for jumping in. Thank you to Lia and Jade. That is us very, very close to time. I would just like to thank you both. As we said, this is our first time we've done this particular webinar. The response has been fabulous. I'd just like to commend you both. There was a lot in there that I think we could all get a lot out of, particularly sort of getting the balance right, the flexibility. Frankly, Jade, the IT setup. I know when I next go to hospital, I have to bring in my own armrest. Frankly, Lia, I think the 3 Ps, processes, procedures, and policies. People can think it's a bit dry, but they're the backbone of getting a business right. I think the piece around avoiding loneliness, frankly, is a really salient point. Because you can think you're working by yourselves, but I think you guys have demonstrated you're not. Those top hacks are absolutely fabulous. I'm not going to pretend I understood them and try and fake it, but frankly they were excellent. And I think you said you were going to share them with the audience, which I think is just fabulous. That just leaves me to thank you for your time today, for the effort that you've put in to putting this together, and we look forward to having you back on. If you are interested, make sure that you join the community of practice. This is an excellent community, extremely vibrant, with great interactivity. And again, thank you to both Lia and Jade. Thank you to the broader audience out there that have participated right the way through. So thank you so much, and good afternoon.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks very
Thank you.
much.
Ta-da.
Bye.
Bye.